Slavery in Brazil. The beginning of slavery in Brazil. The Portuguese began to arrive in Brazil in the early 1500s. It took them over half a century to establish an economy in Brazil. Slavery in Brazil began in 1530. Between 1530 and 1888, around 4 million Africans were sent from Africa and arrived in Brazil. This is more than any other American destination. Brazil received 40% of the total number of Africans brought to the Americas, while the US only received approximately 10%. Sugar plantations began to spring up rapidly all throughout Brazil. Most of these sugar plantations were along the northeast coasts of Brazil. Bahia is a state in northeast Brazil and was home to a large portion of these plantations. The sugar trade finally ended in the late 1700s. Although slaves were distributed to other parts of Brazil, a majority of them remained in Bahia and worked in the capital, Salvador. There were a couple of reasons for slavery to begin in Brazil. By the mid-1500s, sugar plantations began to spring up in the northeast, where the sugar grew very well. The colonists looked to the Indians of that region to provide the necessary workforce for this labor-intensive crop. However, the enslaved Indians quickly fell victim to European diseases or escaped and fled to the interior parts of Brazil, which were mostly uninhabited. In the 16th century, Senegambia, a province in West Africa, provided most of Brazil's slaves. And by 1760, the slowdown in the gold and diamond industries coincided with sugar's second wave, causing a renewed influx of slaves to the Americas, and this led to a massive surge of slaves incoming to Brazil. In 1822, 1.5 million of the 3.5 million people that lived in Brazil were enslaved. Enslaved people were so pivotal to the economy that Ina von Binzer, a German scholar that lived in Brazil, wrote, "In this country, the blacks occupied the main role. They are responsible for all the labor and produce all the wealth in this land. The white Brazilian just doesn't work." During the last 50 years of the slave trade, large numbers of Yorubas were brought to the cities in northeastern Brazil, resulting in a lasting impact of the culture of that region. The end of slavery in Brazil. Brazil ended the legal slave trade in 1850 due to the pressure from Great Britain. In 1871, Brazil passed the Law of the Free Womb. This was a law that freed the children born as slaves from that time forward. Finally, on May 13, 1888, the Golden Law was passed in Brazil. The Golden Law abolished slavery in Brazil with these simple words: "From the date this law, slavery is declared extinct in Brazil." With this law being passed, Brazil was the last American nation to abolish slavery. For 350 years, slavery was the heart of the Brazilian economy. 40% of the 10 million enslaved Africans brought to the New World ended up in Brazil. In 1885, Brazil passed the Sexagenarian Law, a law freeing slaves over 65 years of age, although very few of them reached this age. The Catholic Church ended its support of slavery by 1887. Not long after this, the Portuguese crown also began to position itself against slavery. However, the legal end of slavery in Brazil did little to change the lives of many Afro-Brazilians. The impact of slavery in Brazil. Even after slavery ended, Brazil was seen as a post-racial society. with the mixed race being the national ideal. After slavery was finally abolished, the Brazilian government implemented a policy to whitewash the population. Black immigration was made illegal, and Brazil accepted only white Europeans or Asian immigrants into the country. These efforts by the Brazilian government hardly made a difference in the population and racial demographics of Brazil. Even up to this day, blacks and mixed-race people account for 53% of the population. They also make up 2/3 of the prison population and 76% of the poorest segment of the Brazilian population.